All right. So I guess it's a sign of you're getting older when you are requiring all these aids. So if you have comments today, I'm going to try to hear you. I actually brought my hearing aids and can leave this down whenever I'm talking, but can crank it up when you're talking, so maybe I can hear you. But I forgot my glasses, so I can't see you. I can't get them both at the same time, apparently. I don't know what's going on. That's right, signs of getting older. That's right. That's right. Thankfully, we're not eating because I forgot my teeth, too. Craziness. All right. This morning, I know I say this quite a bit and then almost end up running over, but today I do have, I wonder if this thing is what's, my one hearing aid is going on and off. I bet it's this thing. Yeah, we'll try it. I really don't have a ton of material today, simply because I wanted to be careful, and the challenge that I had with class today, as you can see, this is supposed to be our special topic, Who is the Lord? And Jay, are you here? I don't see Jay. Jay Wright will be taking up for his first class on Wednesday. Oh, there he is. He's in back listening. So he'll be taking up for his first class on Wednesday. And if you look at the schedule here, so I'll be doing this special topic today, and then Jay will have the next three classes really dealing with that first interaction between Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh and how that all starts off, and then 9 of the plagues he's going to be covering, and then Sterling will pick up the next couple classes after that, the 10th plague and the Passover, and the next special class. But when the class shifted by that week and we had to move some things around, originally I had scheduled this special topic and the plagues all together, and so had kind of planned on being able to teach those and just some things that I had planned on covering. When I kind of came up with this topic, I'm going to try really hard not to walk all over Jay. I'm fine walking all over myself, but I don't want to walk all over anything that he would have started to prepare for the next 3 classes here. So we're going to try to keep things a little bit generic, and I may actually end up giving you some time back toward the end of the class here. We'll see. Of course, I've said that before and not even finished the material that I had. So we talked on Wednesday, we really wrapped up chapter 4, and we left here this idea of all of the preparation is now complete for Moses to begin the work that God has called him to do and to save his people out of Egypt. So we discussed how Moses has been uniquely raised up for this role. He was born a Hebrew, but yet raised and educated as an Egyptian. How that he has been instructed by God here, and God has not only told him what to do, but he's also told who? Aaron, right? So he's also spoken directly to Aaron and told Aaron what he's going to do here. And by the time we get to the end of chapter 4, we see that the people themselves have been told of the plan. So Moses and Aaron have gone back to Egypt now, and they are talking with the elders and with a good chunk of the people. It really seems to be like Moses and Aaron will meet with the elders of the congregation, elders of the people, and then they will go back to the individual families and tribes and deliver this message here. But not only the elders, but the entire people have been told of the plan. The message that they were given and the signs that they were given have shown to the people that they are really from Jehovah and that he is going to save them out of this slavery that they are in. So, of course, they then worship God in anticipation of this deliverance that's coming, and we see then Moses and Aaron are ready to go to Pharaoh. Of course, then, in chapter 5 is where we're going to see this interaction between Moses and Aaron, and really you'll see it kind of intermixes. Sometimes it'll say Moses said, sometimes it'll say Aaron said, but it starts right off with that idea that, God is talking to Moses, Moses is talking to Aaron, and Aaron's the one talking to Pharaoh. We don't know for sure if that happened every time, but that's what it seems like here. And so in chapter 5, and right there in verse 1, they go in to see Pharaoh, and then immediately they start into this dialogue of let my people go. And we see Pharaoh makes this statement here. And he really challenges Moses and Aaron, and the first time it says all the elders of the people go to here, and he challenges their statement with this very brash statement in question here. But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." Now it's interesting here that in your Bible, if it has capitalized like the translation that I've copied here does, it'll have that Lord capitalized because they were actually using God's name to talk to Pharaoh. They didn't just use that generic Elohim to say the God of Israel, because Pharaoh would have understood that term Elohim to mean a God just like whose gods? Yeah, just like his gods, right? Just like Egypt's God. That generic term God there is not what Moses is saying. Moses is saying the God of the Hebrews, and here is his name, okay, is the one who is telling you to let my people go. Well, of course, Pharaoh, guess what? This is the first time he's ever heard this name. In fact, we find out later that even God says to Moses that even to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I didn't even talk to them with my name. Okay? So Pharaoh's hearing this name of God for the first time. I don't have any idea who this is. And remember, according to Egyptian theology, they have a bunch of gods, right? In fact, one of the things I'm going to try to leave for Jay is this idea of the plagues going directly against some of their gods, and I'll let him expound on that. But Pharaoh himself in their theology was what? He himself was a god, right? He would have applied that term Elohim to himself. Okay? He considered himself, and the people considered him a direct descendant of Ra, the sun god, appointed by Ra, and he was considered a minor deity himself. So Pharaoh is really saying, well, I'm a god. Who is this Jehovah that I should listen to him? I don't know who Jehovah is. I know the names of all these other gods of Egypt, and maybe I even know the names of some of the other gods of the nations around me, but I've never heard this name Jehovah. Who is he that I should listen to him? Who is he that I should obey his voice? Now, it's not a very smart question to ask of Jehovah, although we shouldn't be surprised by that here. And in fact, the rest of the true Exodus kind of story here is God's answer. Now, once they actually leave Egypt, it's still considered part of the Exodus, but this actually leaving of Egypt, the entire portion of that is going to be God's answer. And if we look through several different passages here, God responds with this idea. Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, chapter 6 and verse 1. I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, 7 and verse 3. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord here. So God is going to answer this question very definitively And he's going to leave absolutely no doubt, not only in Pharaoh's mind, but also in the minds of all the people of Egypt, who he is and that he is God. Okay? Well, let's look at how he does that. When we look at this question then, what was the real purpose of the plagues? And if you think about it, why did God use these plagues? Why did God tell Moses even before he got there that I'm going to use these plagues, I'm going to do these many signs and these wonders in Egypt? Why would he do that? Now, of course, what's the most common answer that we all give? What was the purpose of the plagues? To convince Pharaoh to do what? To let them go. That's right. And on the surface, that seems like it's the correct answer. Pharaoh is hard-hearted. God even told Moses that his heart would be hard and he would need a mighty hand to convince him to let the Israelites leave. However, really, it's true that this does accomplish God's purpose. The plagues do accomplish securing the release of the Israelites from Egypt. They get to leave here. However, if God had wanted, he could have just destroyed the Egyptians. In fact, much later, he says that he could have done that. So God must have had another reason. Because he himself says in chapter 9 and verse 15, this is at the beginning of the 8th plague, God says, "For by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and all of your people with a pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth." If God wanted Israel to truly be free, that's a bad way to say it. God did want Israel to be free, but if he just wanted to accomplish their freedom, what would have been the easiest and most direct way to do that? Yeah, just kill all the Egyptians. Could God have done that? Well, he says here he could have. So if God chose a different method, instead of just wiping out all the Egyptians and having done with it, why would God choose to go through this kind of complicated and drawn out route of going through all of these plagues? God had to have had another reason for the plagues here. Now, I think that it's pretty easy to see when we actually start reading some of these passages about the individual plagues, it becomes pretty easy to see what God's purpose was, okay? Remember, what was the question? What was the question Pharaoh asked? Who is the Lord, and why should I obey, right? So in every single one of the plagues, God is going to go out of his way and do things that maybe weren't the most expedient, took extra time by God, even prolonged the suffering, perhaps, of his people for a while. We don't know exactly how long it took from the time of the first plague till the last plague. Some time passes there. Some people have estimated as much as 2 months or maybe even 3 months it takes for all the plagues to occur. But one way or the other, God chooses to take this long, drawn-out plan. And I think he shows us his purpose by the words he uses in the plagues. And these are numbered by the number of the plagues here. Chapter 7 and verse 17. "By this you shall know that I am the Lord." This is directly to Pharaoh. Plague number 2, "that you may know there is no one like the Lord our God." This is Moses speaking. And you want to think that he's just some other God like what you're used to? No. By these events, you're going to know he is the God here. Even the Egyptians admit in chapter 3, in plague number 3, this is the finger of God. Nobody else could have accomplished this. which really becomes kind of them giving up, because again, I don't want to trample on what Jay's probably going to say too much, but what did the Egyptians do with several of the first plagues? Yeah, they replicated it, right? They used magic and they made it look like, so this is no big deal. But by the third plague, even they're saying, hold up, this is something else here. Chapter 8, verse 22, in the fourth plague, that you will know I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. I'm not just the Lord of heaven, I'm the Lord of the earth also here. Tomorrow, the Lord will do this thing in the land. Even though we're in Egypt, where does God, Jehovah, have power? Right here in the land of Egypt. Even the gods of Egypt can't stop him here. The sixth plague, when the magicians are trying to replicate things and they're trying to argue, it says even the magicians could not stand against God here. He directly attacks them there for the sixth plague. Seventh plague, that you may know there is none like me in all the earth. And in the eighth plague, he's explaining to Moses, why have we been going through all of this stuff? And he says, we've been going through all this so that I may show my signs among them, or these signs of mine among them. God is specifically telling, Jehovah is speaking directly to not only just Pharaoh, but all of the rest of Egypt with these plagues. Okay? And I think he's because if you think about it, who was God really doing this for? What's that? The nation of Israel is a great answer. Because why would he really care about the Pharaoh and the Egyptians? Did he care what they thought? If he wanted to, what could he have done? Just wiped them out. Trying to convert them to Judaism? No. So who was this really for? Because the Pharaoh and the Egyptians, they don't mean anything special to God here. He's not trying to make them his worshipers. He's not trying to convert them. He's just trying to get them to let his people go. So I really believe that what God is telling us here is that throughout all of these things, he had a much different audience in mind. And the Egyptians and Pharaoh are really just a tool. Because after all, what does the book of Romans say about it? And in fact, even another passage here that Romans quotes in chapter 9, Romans says God raised him up for a purpose. Okay? Not just to be Pharaoh, to be, convinced to be let the people go. There was a purpose in all of this. So what could that purpose have been? And I think definitely that the first answer here, Mark hit it directly on the head, is that the first answer is for the Hebrews. And the Hebrews, maybe more specifically, the Hebrews of that time, the people who are in slavery right now. If you think about it, when the people went into Egypt, so of course we know the whole story about Joseph going first and then all the brothers, and then after the brothers go, they go ahead and bring their father and the whole family, and it says 70 people go into Egypt. What was their relationship with God like at that point? As a family. You're probably never going to guess what I'm looking for. God had a very personal relationship with those families, right? We call this the patriarchal age, where God spoke directly to the heads of each of those families, okay? So God had a very direct relationship with Jacob. Did he need to explain to Jacob who he was? No. Did he need to convince Jacob's sons that he was the God of heaven and the God of the earth? No, they knew it because God had that personal relationship with them. However, how much time has passed? Yeah, 400 years plus, we know at this point, right? We know that, that the children of Israel were in Egypt, And we don't really know when that began. Was it the 430 years began when they became slaves, or it began when Jacob and the family went into Egypt? But at least 430 years they were there. Even though people were living a little longer, lifespans weren't the crazy lifespans by this point here. But still, you think 400 years, that's at least 10 generations. When we look at the Hebrews in the book of Judges, we see this pattern. How long, when God really interacts with a people and they believe, how long does that usually last? Anybody remember from the book of Judges? It's usually them people who experienced that interaction with God, and then they will teach their children who God was. But then what almost always happens in the book of Judges, that next generation who didn't experience it, or who couldn't talk directly to people who had experienced it, they're the ones that everything went south on because they fell away. We almost always see the book of Judges, God rescues them, and then the land has rest for about 40 years. That length of that one generation. And it'll say, then rose a generation that didn't remember, and they did what? They sinned, and they sinned against God. That's every other generation. We're now 10 generations away from Jacob. How much do the children of Israel even know about God, Jehovah? We're not really sure. But God is going to teach them who he is here. Yes?
Also, we don't know how long they've been in slavery, but their whole system, their social system, their whole religious system is ruptured and broken down because of slavery.
Oh, sure. I mean, were they even allowed to sacrifice? It doesn't seem to be so, right? Because what's the thing they're asking to do? Let us go sacrifice, right? Okay? They've never even been allowed to do that. So definitely Paul's comment that their religious system, even as it was, has definitely broken down by this point because of slavery and because of just the environment that they were in. So let's look at some of the passages here that talk about why this was for the Hebrews. In chapter 6, verses 6 through 7, I can click my car remote all I want, it's not going to do anything. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them. And I will redeem you with my outstretched arm and with acts of great judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Notice it's the same phrase there. You shall know that I am the Lord. Who was he saying that exact same phrase to? Pharaoh and the Egyptians. But what's the difference here? You'll know I'm the Lord what? Your God. That's right. He is going to teach the Hebrews who their God is. Okay? Not only, we already talked about just how it seems to be in the Bible that a generation who experiences these incredible wonders and these incredible miracles, they're almost always faithful. But God is even telling them now that I'm doing this not just for you, but for your future generations here. In chapter 10 and verse 2, God says, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your grandson how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians and what signs I have done among them, again, that you may know I am the Lord. He wasn't just teaching Pharaoh, who asked this question, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? He's teaching his own people who he is and why they should do what? obey his voice, right? Now, that obey is on two different sides. Egypt should obey because if they don't obey, what's he going to do? He's going to destroy them. That's right. Remember what he told Moses, we already covered before this all began. Tell Pharaoh, if you don't let my firstborn go, what am I going to do? I'm going to kill your firstborn. Okay? Now he's telling the people of Israel, you're going to know that I'm your God, and you're going to tell this story, but from the other side. Instead of this being a story of great destruction and of plagues that were against the people, you're going to be telling the story of how I delivered you out of Egypt. And because I delivered you, that makes me what? Your God. Okay? Yes? Here, hold on one second. Say it again. Yeah, even then. Yeah, that's right. Right now. Right now. That's right. Yep. Okay. Again, I just highlighted that there that you may know. Okay. Now, not only is he trying to tell the Hebrews, but we find out in these passages that he has a wider audience who he is also trying to speak to. He's also doing this so that all the earth will know who he is. Chapter 9, verse 16. But for this purpose, speaking to Pharaoh, for this purpose I have raised you up to show my power so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. Are these events that are happening here in Egypt, are these things that are just going to go quietly into the night and no one's going to hear about? No. Rahab heard about them. So did, we're going to mention in a minute, the Jebusites, right? Okay. So even though they're going to go wander in the wilderness, even later people are going to remember. And of course, here we are, 4,000 years later, 3,700 years later. And what are we doing? We're talking about how that God is the Lord because of these things that he was able to do in Egypt here. There, but Joshua chapter 9, verse 9, this is when the Jebusites come to Joshua, and they said to him, from a very distant country your servants have come because of the name of the Lord your God, for we have heard a report of him and all that he did in Egypt. Why are they so scared of the Israelites? Were they really that great of an army? No. In fact, when God, they get trounced pretty easily, right? Okay? The Jebusites have figured out, and the reason they kind of do this underhanded deal here, remember this is the whole story where, they bake some bread and let it get all crumbly and moldy, and they tell that, look, we left our house and it was warm from the oven. We've been on this long journey. They were trying to convince them they weren't from Canaan. But why are they doing that? They've heard about all the things that God has done in Egypt, and then actually what he does to some other kings, they say we heard about that too. But it's really God they're afraid of, not the Israelites, because they've heard of what God does for them. Of course, then, not only was he speaking to the Hebrews and doing these things for the benefits of the Hebrews who were alive right then, he was also doing this for the benefit of later generations of Hebrews. Okay? So again, in chapter 12 and verses 13 and 14, this is of course with the last plague, the Passover. I will pass over you and no plague will befall to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be for you a memorial day, that you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations as a statute forever. What was this Passover supposed to remind all of the rest of the generations of the Jews about what God had done for them. That's right. You want to ask, why do I owe my fealty to God? Who is Jehovah that I should listen to him? What's the answer? I'm going to remind you every single year, because without me, where would you be? Still stuck in Egypt in slavery. Okay. Another passage that talks about this, I guess, is in Joshua chapter 24. So, of course, Joshua now has completed the mission, okay? When we look at the promise to Abraham, by the time you get to Joshua, 3 of the 5 are complete. Great people, they have the land, and they have a great name. There's no kings yet, and, of course, Jesus hasn't been born yet. But 3 of the promises to Abraham have been complete by the end of the book of Joshua. And this is where Joshua is speaking to all the people, and he's giving them this recount of the history. And I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in the midst of it. And afterward I brought you out. Then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. And when they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians and made the sea come upon them and cover them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. This is roughly 400 years later. No, that's the end of the book of Judges, sorry. The end of the book of Joshua here is what? 60 years later? Maybe 80 years later? And Joshua is still telling them about what? How God took them out of Egypt. Okay? Some other things that the purpose of the plagues do is they showcase God's power. They showcase his power over the earth. What 2 plagues showcase his power over the earth? The Nile turning to blood and darkness, I said, show his power over the earth. He shows his power over all the creatures of the earth. There's several plagues here, right? The frogs, the gnats, the flies, the livestock dying, the locust. God has complete power over all creatures of the earth. He has complete power over man's health, and when man doesn't do what he wants, he is able to strike him down and afflict him. This is the part where even the magicians couldn't stand against that plague. And of course, God has the power of life and death. And he shows that through that death of the firstborn. Between the Egyptian gods and the God of the Hebrews. Absolutely. Yeah, he's showing, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second too, that really he is showing that he is, that's the bell to go get your kids, I think, right? If you have kids in class, that's the bell for that. So he is showing, just as you mentioned here, that he is the Lord, the one and true God who is different from all these other gods that are out there. Okay? In chapter 12 and verse 12, if you question whether the plagues were meant to go against the gods of Egypt, he specifically says it here. And on all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. Not them, me. And he shows his power over them. Then when we get to chapter 18 and verse 10, we see, oh, who is like thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, and doing wonders? That's actually from some previous chapters. That's misquoted there. That's from about chapter 14. That's in the Song of Moses there. But even outside of the Israelites, people are going to start recognizing that God is the true God. And in 18 verse 10 and 11 here, Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people." Pharaoh and the Egyptians and what they believed to be the Egyptian gods had disdain for Jehovah. Who is he that we should obey his voice? By the time we get done with the plagues, and by the time Israel leaves Egypt, who is questioning whether the Lord is God and if they should listen to him? Okay. God fulfills his purpose. God delivers his message, not just to the Egyptians. They were just part of the story. So when Jay is taking the next 3 classes and he's going over this interaction and he's going over this idea of the plagues, and when Sterling talks about the 10th plague in the Passover, yes, it accomplished God's goal of getting the children of Israel out of Egypt. But the real message wasn't for Egypt. The real message was for the Hebrews. And I would say that the real message was for us too, right? So that we could all these years later be reading these stories and understanding that Jehovah is God and we should obey him. All right, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. That's unless somebody has some other comments, that's all I had. A question? Great. Oh, yes. Well, if you look at that passage from the Song of Moses there, so Paul's comment was that Moses needed some convincing early on, but later he doesn't. There at the burning bush, he's even asking, "What's your name? Who are you?" And he tries to beg out of it. Please find somebody else. Can you imagine Moses trying to go against God after the plagues? I wouldn't think so, but what do we know he does? He still slips up, right? He's still human. Yeah, one time.